So welcome everybody. Thanks for joining today. Just a little bit of housekeeping to start with. As I say, it is being recorded. Just can you ensure that you're on mute and feel free to turn your cameras off if you feel more comfortable with that. As I say, there will be time at the end for questions. These can be sent through the chat or if you'd like to unmute yourself at the end. So I'm Shah. I'm an equality, diversity and inclusion consultant at the Equal Group. So we're a data-driven EDI consultancy based in Birmingham. We work alongside forward-thinking organisations to provide consulting and tech solutions that deliver sustainable progress. So our passion comes from a deep-seated belief that EDI benefits not only individuals, but organisations, sectors and society as a whole. So changing attitudes in the workplace, it can be a catalyst to how we interact with our colleagues in and outside the office or other environments. So today's webinar, it is a safe space to explore sensitive topics. So please feel free to share your views in the chat. So let's get started. So International Women's Day, it's celebrated around the world to recognise women for their achievements. So today we'll be chatting to two incredible women who've excelled in their fields. However, women do still face multiple interconnected and subtle barriers in the workplace, particularly in terms of maternity, pregnancy, care and responsibilities. You know, fewer than 10% of CEOs at UK FTSE 350 companies are female, with women also holding fewer than 20% of commercial roles on FTSE 350 boards and executive committees. So legislation alone can't address them all because they are embedded in everyday attitudes, as we know, and actions. I mean, this can sometimes stem from past legacies and it's not intentional necessarily. But understanding barriers involves looking beyond external factors and just examining all the internalized norms and perception. I mean, this being said, just over 20% of all new companies were all female-led in 2022. In January 2024, 42.6% of STSE 100 and 42.1% of FTSE 350 directorships were occupied by women. 47% of all new FTSE 100 board appointments were women as well. And the female employment rate, was 72.1% in October to December 2023, which is up from 71.9% in the previous quarter. So the achievements of women in business can't be overlooked, which brings me nicely onto our two incredible guest speakers, both of whom have achieved great things in their respective fields. So we'll be discussing the importance of not only investing in women, but why it's just as crucial to recognise the part that women play in the success of companies. So today, I'm joined by founder and CEO of Prabhaav Global, Ritika Wadhwa. Hello, Ritika.
Hi, Charlotte. Thank you so much for that lovely introduction and for getting all my acronyms and names right.
Oh, I'm so pleased.
Well done. Well done. Hi, everyone. Welcome to this wonderful webinar. I am Ritika Wadhwa. I am the CEO and founder of Prabhaav Global. Prabhaav means impact in Hindi. And what my organization does is use the transformational power of cultural intelligence for impactful leadership, in a nutshell. I also sit on the strategic advisory board for British Transport Police. I am a trustee at the 5% Club, and I'm also a leadership fellow at Windsor Castle, among my several voluntary roles, hopefully to make an impact in the world.
How you find the time? Incredible. We're also
and two young girls, so little ones, six-year-old who follows me around.
I'd say that's the biggest challenge.
All over the
Oh, thank you so much, Ritika. I'm also joined by Senior Service Assurance Specialist at FedEx Express, Billie Hoey. Hi, Billie.
Hello, everybody. Thank you very much for having me. I'm hoping you can all hear me okay. We've had some technical challenges.
As always.
As always. Yes, thank you for having me. So I'm Billie Hoey. I am a service assurance specialist at FedEx. I'm definitely very honoured to be here today. I work in operations, so definitely have a take on various different things to maybe share with everybody today. But yeah, I'm really grateful to be here.
Thanks, Billie. So we have got a bunch of questions to ask, you know, We really want to find out a lot about you and how we can remove barriers for women in the workplace. So Ritika, to you first, where did you start your career and how did you get to where you are now?
We have an hour, don't we?
Yeah.
That'll take up all of that. So I started my career in India. That's where I was born and brought up. And talk about starting your career. I wasn't allowed to work. Literally, I wasn't. I was the only one from my cohort to receive a job offer from a top international advertising agency. And the patriarchal structures and society that I operated in pretty much said, no, you can't go to work. You can't bring shame upon our family by going to work because you're a woman. What is it that we can't provide for you? Here's a blank check. Don't do that to us and our family name in our society by going to work. So that's where my career started. And of course, I went to work, called a rebel, black sheep, call it whatever you want. But that was me living my life on my terms. I wasn't really doing anything wrong. I was only going to work. And the reason why I was determined to go to work was because I knew it would bring me freedom. Freedom to be who I wanted to be, which means not get married at the age of arranged marriage at the age of 20 something, first child at the age of 20 something, second child before you're 30. So society would have decided the way I would have led my life. And that's not what I wanted. The only way I could break that barrier was to earn my own money, which is why I was determined to work. And so having started off with gender really was the only thing that differentiated me from anyone else. And that came in the way of me wanting to be who I am, to then moving to the UK and other layers of identity where I felt relatively safe as a female. Relative, right? So relatively safe as a female to be who I wanted to be. But then there was the layers of being an immigrant, having an accent, a difficult name, a woman of color, which I had never been called before. And so all those layers of my identity determined to a great extent where my career would go, until about 3 years ago when I decided to say, enough is enough. If I'm going to give so many hours a week to my work, then I'm going to make it count. And that's when I found, or cultural intelligence found me, and it sort of brought together all my passions, my lived experience, my commitment towards using all of that to make an impact. And that's what I'm doing right now.
Incredible. Can you just briefly tell us a little bit about cultural intelligence?
Sure. So I was the Chief Operating Officer at Cultural Intelligence Center in my previous role, which was very fortunate to learn about what was cultural intelligence from really the founders. Cultural intelligence takes off from where emotional intelligence leaves us. And what that does is it is the ability that we can all develop. It's a capability that helps us work effectively with people that are different from us. So emotional intelligence means I look at the world or my emotions and emotions of those around me through my lens. Whereas if you add cultural intelligence to it, I'm bringing a sense of curiosity. I'm bringing a sense of, okay, this is not acceptable or familiar to me, but doesn't make it wrong. And so cultural intelligence is a framework, is the 4 capabilities that I work with senior leaders across organizations around the world to help them work effectively in a diverse, digital, and divided world, in a nutshell.
It's a great nutshell. Incredible. Thank you. Billie, really like to hear some more about yourself.
So my entry into logistics is very different. So I started as a skincare specialist, working in the beauty industry, skincare and laser hair removal to be specific. But I decided at 20 I wanted to move out. So unfortunately, that industry is very well qualified, but not very well paid. So I kind of recognised the fact that, in my head, I felt like I needed to get a grown-up job, something that could pay the bills more than what I was doing. And it was such a shame because I absolutely loved it. But you know, you have to adapt in these situations. So I started in customer services at TNT, and I was 21. I had never worked in any sort of corporate thing in my entire life, so that was a huge culture shock for me in general, and definitely found myself in trouble a few times with saying, you know, various things that I could say to clients but maybe couldn't say, you know, in a corporate world, and you had to be very mindful of certain things. So it was a really good learning opportunity for me in that sense. So I was in customer services for about 18 months, where I met Charlotte. So that was great. And then I moved on to customer experience, where I supported sort of dedicated temperature controlled shipment. So various different companies that would ship things that needed to be sort of dry iced or that sort of thing. And then I took a bit of a leap into operations. Now, operations is a completely different beast for anything that I had ever known before, and I very much thought, you know, it'll be fine. It can't be that much different. Completely wrong. Not many depots, should I say, usually have a 5'2", you know, ginger haired girl wearing a bright pink suit walking in and asking them what they're doing with various different boxes and packages. So it was a huge challenge in terms of that knowledge, and actually the jump between customer experience and thinking about customers and how we elevate things like that, to then thinking about the logistics behind things and how actually we get that package from A to B, was something I was definitely not prepared for. So it was a huge learning in the in between of that. But yeah, it's been good, but completely different. You know, there was no dream of delivering packages. It was not like that at all. I didn't dream about pallets and parcel tape, so it's something I fell into. But you know, I've made a really good career out of it, and I love it, to be fair. Not what I considered the way forward, but it's great.
Well, you're clearly excelling in your field. I mean, one thing you've omitted from your introduction is your recent win at Every Woman, which I think needs to be spoken about. So if you can give us a little bit about that, that'd be great.
Yeah, so to be honest, I forget about it sometimes, which is awful, isn't it? So yeah, last year I was awarded the Every Woman in Transport and Logistics Passenger and Customer Award, and it's basically given to individuals who put the customer at the heart of everything, and strive to make real change for women in logistics and transport. So it was awarded to me based on various different things, but some of the relationships that I had built within operations to improve service for FedEx, alongside some of the charity work that I've been doing, and then supporting the network that we have in FedEx, which is called the Women's Inclusive Network. And it's where we have this huge party of people essentially that get together. You know, we do things like coaching, mentoring, we do webinars on various different things, and it's about really supporting women within sort of male dominated industries. So there's been a lot of work that's gone into that previously with a great committee as well. It's not just me, but that's why I was awarded that fabulous award.
Amazing. And I can imagine that was such a big thing for you. I want to touch on something that both of you have spoken to, in terms of what barriers are still faced by women in your particular industries or in industries that you have experience in. You know, how does that intersect with the work that you do, and how does that impact the work? Ritika, I'll come to you first.
Yeah, I mean, gosh, there was a time, by the way, congratulations, Billie, that was phenomenal to hear. Thank you for sharing that. Talk about, I was reading, sorry, I don't know how many of you have heard of the book Invisible Woman. Highly recommend everyone getting that book and reading it. But really, even 50 years ago, we, as women, we weren't allowed to wear trousers or pants or whatever you call it in whichever continent, right? And so it feels like we've come a long way from that, in that at least we can sort of wear what we want to do work. But really, if we look at the statistics, that it's moving at glacial pace, it really is. And that is, it is disheartening, but at the same time, there's lots of hope as I see the next generation coming in. The barriers are real, isn't it? The biases, the stereotypes, and it does feel more and more that the world is made for men by men. So one of the examples that I want to share is this lovely lady who cooks for me. And I say cooks for me because I'm a vegetarian and the rest of my family eats meat. So I just have to be careful about not being able to, with everything else, I can't make 2 meals a day. So this lovely lady makes home cooked food and brings it for me. And she came and she shared the story with me last week. She said she wanted to become a bus driver. Wow, I said, that's amazing, because she comes from a very shy Indian middle-class family, born and brought up in India, and, cooking and providing food to people, really. And I said, that's amazing. And she was going through all the motions of becoming a bus driver. So she went through the theory test, she went through the driving test, she went through every test possible, and she failed at the last ladder. The last final test she failed. You know what that was? That was that she couldn't stand and pull down the emergency thing. Her hand just didn't reach. Right? Let's let that set in for a second around barriers. So she is fully equipped to drive the bus. But because of her height, talking about height, if she stands, her hand doesn't reach the emergency lever or whatever that is at the top. So who's designed the bus in such a way that there's already a barrier for someone that's of a certain height and they can't do that job? So what are these barriers? Who's designing spaces for us when they look at, oh, we're designing a mall, half of it is going to be the washrooms, exactly half of it. We're going to be equal, exactly half of it is for men and half of it for women. Does that really work? Don't we always get frustrated with all those queues out of the door when we go to the women's toilet compared to the men's toilet? Why is that? And there are so many things that we can talk about in our real life that are barriers made by the system, made in a way that we just can't. When you ask for certain qualifications, when you ask for certain experience for a certain job, are we really considering the other half of the population and those that are underrepresented and marginalized when you're coming up with what is required from a job spec to what is required for spaces to genuinely be equitable? So those barriers, I mean, patriarchy is a barrier in itself and that thinking that goes with it. But yeah, everything else.
Yeah, absolutely.
Across industries, across sectors.
Yeah, inequity is the biggest problem, essentially, isn't it? It's everything's been made to be equal, but that doesn't actually mean that it works for everybody. And I think that's probably the biggest barrier that we face in terms of the workplace. And I know that speaks to logistics, having come from logistics myself. When it comes to depots, when it comes to the lorries, when it comes to everything, essentially. I know there was a lot of work being done in terms of making them more equitable, but it doesn't feel like it's at the right kind of pace. It needs more momentum behind it. Have you got anything to add, Billie, before?
So one activity I always like to play in these sorts of conversations is, for everyone on the call, imagine a lorry driver. So imagine a truck driver, they're driving at various different places, taking the parcels from A to B. Most people imagine a man. Like, that's just how it goes. I'm sure some of us on this call imagine a man. Before, when I had this sort of situation with me, I thought, that's definitely what I imagined. Same with, in the depots, in a warehouse environment, if you imagine somebody loading parcels from that trailer onto a belt, how many people on this call imagine a man? Because it's a male dominated industry, and everybody has such unconscious biases that are drilled into us from a very early age. It's not something that we actively think about. It's just something that you do. And you can apply that logic anywhere. If you imagine a nurse, how many of us would imagine a woman? It's put in, we've been siloed into these sort of boxes in these industries. And that's where we feel like, if anyone's outside of the ordinary for that, then it's almost odd, isn't it, to see that in that element. So I think for me in operations, I came from customer experience and customer services, which is fairly an equal split, to be honest, in terms of the sort of the gender. And then when you go into operations, it is very male dominated. And I think as well, there is still very much a physical barrier to the job. I'll never forget, I once picked up a box that was in the way, and somebody said to me, "Oh, you all right picking that up?" And I thought, Yeah, I'm fine with my tiny little lady arms. You know, I'm okay to pick up a box. It's not a problem. And I think there's still probably an element there where, especially within that sort of operational background in any industry, there is a physical element to the job. And, you know, women are just as capable of picking up a box and moving it to somewhere else as a man is. But there is still probably that unconscious bias that those sorts of industries are male jobs. They're for men, not for women.
Absolutely. And I think unconscious bias has a huge part to play in that. Ritika, I see you had something to say.
Yeah, no, I was just going to add, that's a great example, Billie. There was an ad campaign recently around imagine a CEO. Who is that? Imagine a nurse. Who is that? Imagine a teacher. Who is that? And that whole bias, unconscious bias, and stereotypes, how they really kick in. Yeah, how do we actively acknowledge those biases in the spaces that we are in? And I've seen this really lovely ad that's been circulating since this last couple of days about Down Syndrome Day. I don't know if people have seen that.
that advert.
Yeah, it's beautiful,
Yes.
isn't it? I would highly recommend. It says, assume I can, maybe I will. And I absolutely love that ad that's circulating. And I think that's so, not to take away from the from what it's trying to create for Down syndrome, but also how it applies to really any underrepresented communities.
But it's the message, isn't it? The message that's important. And we'll try and find the link to that because it is incredible. And I think it as you say, it does apply to everybody who's underrepresented. It's sort of that assumption, like the assumption that Billie couldn't pick up a box, the assumption that, you know, you were to marry and to have children at an early age instead of pursue a career. And I think it affects us all as women. And I know it doesn't just affect women, as you say, with that ad campaign. It's, you know, who do you imagine when you see a nurse? And there's sort of a level of ridicule as well, isn't there? There's microaggressions are rampant in those areas, particularly if you don't fit the mold. So I think like an important discussion is how do we even begin to remove those barriers? Like what steps can we make, whether they're small or large? What are the little wins and what are the things that need to happen straight away?
Billie, did you want to go first this time?
Yeah, no problem. So I think for me, a lot of the, you know, there's a lot that we can do as individuals, but you know, we're never going to make. It needs to come from everybody. So everyone you know, one person alone is probably not going to be able to fix all of these problems. It's got to be something that we address every day, you know, calling these things out. You know, when people make those sorts of comments, you know, that's just a strange comment. I'd love to understand how, you know, how you understand it that way, you know, and to try and kind of challenge those politely, to understand the sort of thinking that goes on behind those. And I also think in terms of the, you know, bridging the gap in general, there needs to be, companies need to take good responsibility for career progression. You know, don't assume, and it comes back to that point that you were just saying, Ritika, in terms of, you know, don't assume that a female may not want that opportunity. Ask her, you know, she'll be able to tell you if she's interested or not. Don't assume that, you know, maybe because she's got kids, it probably wouldn't work around her lifestyle, or, you know, because it's a travel, she might not want to travel. Just ask the person, this is an opportunity we've got here. You know, we think you'd be a great fit. What do you think? I think it's about that, giving people that opportunity to turn down those things that come their way, and making sure that, you know, senior managers and various different people are taking on a progression role, and they're talent spotting, and they're helping to upskill and coach people, because you can't just put all your eggs in one basket. You've got to make sure that it's, you know, across the board, and that people are getting that opportunity to develop, because you know, I'm sure we've all agreed here, it's been proven statistically time and time and again that a balanced workforce is actually way more beneficial for a company in terms of their progress. So it's nothing but beneficial to open up those opportunities to everybody.
Yeah, I love that. It is beneficial for everybody, but it's understanding how that benefit works and where the power structures sit. So I want to talk about the system a little bit here. And I want to be a little bit more controversial, if I may, around the concept of imposter syndrome and how that is applied mainly to women and not so much to men. I heard a speech. Sorry, I've got something stuck in my throat. I heard this amazing speech by this woman called Reshma Saujani, who's also on LinkedIn. I'll message that on here in a bit. And what she talks about is about 50 or 60 years, there was an ailment identified as bicycle face. I don't know if anyone's heard of it. Bicycle face. It was basically women that got on the bicycle, and as they rode uphill, they made this face, because obviously they were going, whatever that was. And it was analyzed as some sort of an ailment or some sort of a problem when you had bicycle face, because what that was men realized that if women got on bicycles, they became more independent. They could go from one place to the other without them. So they wanted to put a barrier in place to stop them from doing that. And they invented this thing called bicycle face. And I think imposter syndrome is that, because when we go into spaces where we feel we're not good enough or we need to do more, is that the system telling us that we're not good enough because the system's set up for certain people in a certain way to be good enough? Are we genuinely not good enough? And then we call it imposter syndrome, when actually you should be sorting out the system and not me. I'm good enough like that lovely lady. She can drive the bus well enough, but you've made sure that the lever is so up there. Should she be getting an imposter syndrome about being a bus driver? No, because she's perfectly capable. So I want to say a little bit about years and years and years and years of the system doing what it's meant to do. And in the process, we are meant to feel like it's about biases or stereotypes, or we are not good enough, or we need to do more. So I think from that perspective, that just going back to your question, there's that whole imposter syndrome, the system element, but also those in power, who is in power and what's in it for them to open up the spaces, to increase the size of the table. Because this is why we have all the problems in the world right now. This is why we have the division. Those in power, my faith is better. I have more money. I have more. Why would I give all of that up? I want more. I want more. I want more. And so who's willing to step out of that and go, you know what? I'm going to be an ally and actually do something about that. And when I say ally, my last point on this one would be a woman empowering women as much as you're expecting anyone else to support us. Why should we not? I mean, there's boys' clubs going on for years and years and years and years. What stops us from having girls' clubs and going off and, I don't know, going for a spa day or whatever it is that you fancy doing to bond with each other? So there's so many things that can be done, small steps, but big steps that will slowly, we have come a long way, but we still have a long way to go.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And sort of touching on your point, I know there's a statistic out there in terms of imposter syndrome as well, that when a woman identifies an opportunity for a job, she wants to feel like she knows at least 90% of what she's doing prior to even going for the role. But if in men, it sits somewhere more like 55, 65%. And it shows that it is within the system, isn't it? And I think it's hugely important that we address that. And the only way to do that really is to look internally and look at the data of companies, to look at the policies, the practices, how can we adjust those? How can we work so that they're more equitable for everybody? And it starts really at a base level, doesn't it? You have to dig deep right at the base of your organization and think, okay, how do we make real change here? And I think,
am I wrong in this? I'm just digging in my brain here that from a very early age, boys are taught to be confident and girls are taught to be brave. Is that?
I mean, from personal experience, I don't know how any other women feel on the call or any men on the call feel. There's that whole gender gap immediately. I have 2 young children, and my youngest child is 3 years old, and he's already very much, you can see that he's impacted by these gender roles. And not from an in-house perspective, from outside external factors. So, if I talk about like his dad putting nail polish on, it would be, oh no, he can't wear that, that's for girls. And it's just, he's 3 years old. So this impacts us from birth, from the gender reveals, from everywhere. So it is a systemic problem. It's not something that, is just a small thing that needs to be fixed, but it's widespread.
But what's hope? What's the biggest hope for me? Sorry, and I'm going to get off the podium then.
Never get off the podium, Ritika, never.
Is the generations coming after us? Because, my 12-year-old rallies of pronouns like it's second skin, second nature. She
Absolutely.
doesn't fumble for a second if her friend is they or them. While we still try and get our head around it, all for the right reasons. And also I've been to several events. I spoke to 216 to 18-year-olds recently from very undeserved backgrounds. And they stand up and they are confident about the ask, about the fact that they're driven by accountability, by purpose, and they're not taking no for an answer. So I think if you flip that, organizations that really want to survive, let alone thrive in the next 10, 20 years, you're not going to have an option. You're just not. And that to me is going to be the biggest barrier that breaks down.
Yeah, absolutely. And a third of people that look at applications, from the younger generations, they're looking for your EDI strategies. They're looking for how inclusive your policies are. They're looking for even how accessible your job descriptions are. So it's, it is going to change. And it's the speed of that change, isn't it? I suppose. We do have hope in the younger generations, as always.
Yeah.
Amazing. I mean, are there any, obviously there will be, but are there any positive experiences in the workplace that being a woman have given you? I'm going to come to Ritika.
Positive experiences being a woman has given me. I think that's a hard one, isn't it?
That's the
Literally, I've had to
question.
code switch and mask in every role because, when I started off my career in advertising about 25 something years ago, I was the only woman on the floor, only girl on the floor at that point. So literally trying to fit in with the men, trying to emulate what they were doing, hide those parts of you that weren't manly, so to speak, not get too emotional, all of that. And then coming to the UK, there was the gender element, but also I was very conscious of my accent. I was very conscious of the color of my skin. I was very conscious of the fact that I wasn't born and brought up here, and how that translated into the conversations that happened around me all the time. I didn't understand the TV shows they would talk about or football that they would talk about. So there was no bonding really. And I walked into boardrooms trying to do my best, but never feeling that it was good enough. So that imposter syndrome always hung low. From a positive experience, I think what's really, really, really positive is where I am right now. As a woman who is going through menopause in her late 40s, and I couldn't be more prouder of my identity and who I am, and nothing can take that away. And this, I wish that I'd felt like this 20 something years ago. I wish that I had come into my full self, being so proud in my skin, my experiences, who I am. And literally, I genuinely feel like a phoenix who's risen from the ashes, and try and stop me now. So what is coming from that? From completely owning who I am, my identity, without any, I'm not saying I'm perfect, but without giving myself excuses at this stage, has brought opportunities that I couldn't even fathom even 2 years ago. So that complete flip of 25 something years of doing it a certain way, and 2 something years doing a certain way. And I see the experience being completely black and white, no pun intended. And it's empowering as never before.
Yeah, and imagine what younger generations can achieve if they realize that earlier than we do. Like I know that I'm similar. I mean, I'm 36, and to me, I've only felt like confident in what I'm doing for probably the past couple of years, and confident in who I am as a person, and being able to be the person that I am authentically. So I think it's a difficult time, isn't it? In your 20s anyway, generally. So I think doing what you're doing is incredible, and all the work you're doing with cultural intelligence. Billie, to you.
That's really refreshing to hear as well, because I am in that 20s period where, I feel like I should have everything sorted. I feel like I should know exactly what I'm doing. And every day I kind of think, I am winging this. Like, I'm totally winging this. And people are expecting me to have answers. And I'll sit there and think, hey? So it's really nice to hear that you're in a position now, Ritika, where you feel really confident, and you're on that sort of self-love journey. And I'm very much looking forward to get into that point, because I do think at the minute there's still this, you've got to do everything in your 20s, otherwise you'll be too old to do anything else. And it's about breaking down that barrier, isn't it? That your life's not over when you turn 30, which I think is another thing that is instilled into you, I think. So it's really, really nice to hear that. But my experience is, you know, I was very aware of coming into my role as a woman. So it kind of pushed me right from the beginning to make sure I knew as much as I could do. You know, I downloaded as much info as I could from mentors and from people that were sort of supporting me coaching wise, because I wanted to know. And again, it comes back to that probably imposter syndrome. You know, I've always struggled a little bit with that. And I wanted to know that when I was sat at that table, I had earned my place there, and there wasn't really anything that they could ask me where I would think, I don't really know the answer to that. So I almost kind of over prepared because I wanted to know that I had got there for the right reasons. And I think because of that, I was very fortunate in the sense that earned me a lot of respect, and I seem to have this ability somewhere along the lines where people were interested in knowing what I've got to say. So it was nice to have that sort of respect in that background, because you're then able to influence people, you know, in a polite way, because I think people forget as well, and it comes back to this point I'm sure everybody teaches their children, you know, kindness goes a long way. Being a nice person goes a hugely long way. And I think if you are a nice person and you try and understand other people and you're conscious of other people's feelings, it earns you a respect that does help to overcome some of the barriers that you face when you're a woman in these industries. And I always think as well, you know, if you're being met with resistance in any of these things, it's probably because you're doing something new. It's probably because change is scary for everybody and you're doing something that nobody thought of previously. So take that. If you're in a situation now where you think, oh God, this is so hard, this is really tricky for us, take that and just think that resistance is usually because you're rising up a little bit, and it's the turbulence you get as you go there.
Absolutely. And I think that does speak to that point about you having to feel like you have to be over prepared for any situation, about, you know, needing to know everything, to do everything. Well, really, it is okay to go into a situation and just be like, I don't know the answer to that. I do it a lot, probably too much, but, you know, I don't know the answer to this. You know, I'll go and find out. I'll see what I can find. We can collaborate together. And I think, you know, collaboration is key when it comes to getting past all of the barriers that we face. And I just think, what can we ourselves as individuals and men do as, you know, allies, to be allies for women, but also to advocate for them, to do more than to just, you know, posture and say like, I'm going to share this, I'm going to do this. Like, what can we actively do as individuals, Billie?
So I think for men specifically, my advice would always be get involved in these conversations. You are naturally in a, you know, rightly or wrongly, you are naturally in a respected position in this situation. You know, getting involved in these discussions and politely challenging, you know, why somebody thinks that way, why somebody has made that suggestion, will make people understand that it's not just an issue for women. I think that's the biggest thing. We can have, you know, these collective groups, we can have these collective teams where women support women, and we're all shouting about it and posting on social media on International Women's Day. But is everybody comfortable with challenging a comment that maybe you hear in a boardroom, or maybe you hear in that situation? Because that's the only way that any of this will ever change. You know, and again, coming back to my point, you know, previously, don't make assumptions about somebody, because it more times than often it's an unnecessary assumption anyway. And I think for companies, it's so important to have these sorts of women's groups where you can talk about topics and you can work on things like development. You know, we have something similar where we look at things like the menopause, and we're removing the stigma around that and how managers should be dealing with that sort of thing at work, because it's not a taboo subject. You should be able to tell your manager you are struggling with X, Y, and Z, and they should be equipped to be able to deal with that and say, okay, no problem. So here is some things that we've got prepared in our management packs that you can look at this and see if there's anything that helps, and we'll set you up in terms of that. So, you know, managers have to develop that industry, you know, specific thing where you are making sure that it is inclusive and that, you know, they're not embarrassed to talk about these sorts of things. But, you know, ultimately sharing your network as well, I think, is really important, especially for men with their female counterparts. You know, share your network and help to broaden that horizon. It helps to open more doors and more opportunities and things. But, you know, ultimately, I always ask everybody, you know, give your daughters, your nieces, your sisters the same opportunities you would give your sons. That is all it is. It doesn't have to be this really complex thing. You can strip it back to something as simple as that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's about being able to have uncomfortable conversations as well, isn't
Of
it? Like
course.
arming yourself with the tools that you can have uncomfortable conversations. And
Of
you know, the
course.
more you have those conversations as well, the more comfortable they become. And it becomes more natural to think and change those thoughts and that unconscious bias. So it's, yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Ritika?
Yeah, I've done some work around using cultural intelligence for allyship, actually, and that holds people accountable. Uh, I've seen that in action. So what it is that it starts with the CQ drive. So why do you want to be an ally? Why? You've got to ask yourself, which cause do you want to be an ally for and why? Because you've got to know at the bottom of your heart the real motivation for wanting to do this, whatever the reason be. Because it's very much like couch to 5K. If I'm not clear about why I need to get up from the couch and run 5 kilometers, as my lovely friend Marsha says, it becomes very difficult to get up from the couch day after day. So if I want to do it to lose weight or for my mental well-being or to get healthy, this is why do you want to be an ally? And then your journey will become easy. So what that does is that, okay, I want to be as a man, I want to be an ally for women. So what knowledge do I need? What are the current policies and procedures in my organizations that are not supporting that? How am I, what can I read? What podcasts can I listen to? What books should I read to get a different worldview? Someone told me recently about a virtual reality goggle that they put on, and they were a really, really tall man, but then they put the goggle on to feel like a woman. And they walked around the room and I said, oh my God, everything is so big, right? So how are you looking? How are you flipping your experience to be able to be, and that's your knowledge part. And then there's a CQ action part, really, that is the part where I need to understand in which situation am I standing up as an ally, and in which situation actually is my place to sit back down and allow the space for those that can fight their own battles. And so having that very clear motivation, having the information you need, and then knowing when to adapt and not, what to do or not, from a micro and a macro perspective as an ally, that's where change will happen.
Yeah, absolutely. And I touching on one of your points there, there was a piece that was released, I believe, I can't remember who was released it, but it was on Twitter, and Ellen White, the footballer, swapped Twitter accounts with Phil Neville to see what responses they got to sharing exactly the same tweets. And it was just so, not eye-opening, because it's expected, really. But I think it's important to share those experiences and just say, you know, this is the difference when it comes from a woman than it is when it comes from a man. And I know that's happened in workplaces. People have switched emails to see how people respond to exactly the same things. And I think it's also important to ensure that as an ally, that you consider the historical factors, and also intersectionality is really important with this as well. And it's important to make sure that you're not saying, yeah, but that's in the past, that's happened, that doesn't matter anymore, but it's impacted everything. Again, not to sort of sway away from the point, but with women's football, the only reason that they were ever not as successful as the men's sport is because for 50 years they were banned from playing professional sport. They were getting huge crowds, larger numbers than the men were getting. And then this rule was put in place. And the same as bicycle face, it's the same was put in place to say, no, this is not happening. This is not ladylike, was literally what was put out there to play football. So they were stopped. So, you know, that matters because that's hampered their advancement. And that happens in the workplace too.
You need assignments in the workplace.
Sorry, I can hear a bit of background noise. I think right now, what we could do is go into the Q&A. If anyone has any questions, you can either pop them in the chat for our panel, or it'd be really great to hear some voices. So if anyone's feeling brave, that would be great. Anyone? Rena. Hi, Rena.
Hello. I'm so glad I joined this afternoon. Of all the things I could have been doing, I am really, really pleased I am here. It has been fascinating to hear from Ritika and Billie. Thank you so much. And Ritika in particular, I feel your story. I see your story. I see my story in your story. So it is particularly impactful for me to hear you speak, because I've never heard a woman look like me, I don't have exactly the same lived experience, but some of the things you've shared really, really resonate with me on a personal level. And I guess this is where I am at the moment. I feel a little bit lost. I feel I've done reasonably well where I am, but I think I've got a way to go and I don't know how to get there. I don't have access to networks, mentors, coaches, and I'm being quite selective about where I go, because I think that lived experience is important to me. I need that. So my question is around where is this space for women around networking, mentoring, coaching? What is available? Because beyond my very narrow world, I don't know where to start.
What do you do, Reena?
So I trained as a physiotherapist, but I
Okay.
currently work for our professional body, the Chartered Society of Physiotherapy. So it's a national organisation, and I'm currently in an assistant director role.
Yeah, it's a great question. Now, if I sort of flip my own experience, considering I wasn't even born and brought up in this country, so I didn't have any friends when I came here. I didn't have any mom or dad who called anyone, or any networks from university that I could reach out to, even that as to start with. And like you, when you're lost on the path around how to get there, I think what really, really helped me, I know what really helped me was when my purpose became clear. What is it that I wanted to do and how I wanted to have an impact? When that was clear, then it was so easy to reach out and really, I mean, gosh, even on LinkedIn, 2 years ago, I had 600 and something connections, followers, and now I'm at 20,000. And I'm only giving that as an example because in 2 years, my purpose has been clear. And when your purpose is clear, it's easy to go to networking events because you're talking about what you want to achieve rather than who you are. And that makes it so much more easier. It becomes easier to find those spaces that you can, I know a million really good coaches, sorry, really good coaches, sponsorship, those networks. So I think LinkedIn is definitely a great way to get out there and start connecting with people and find out more and more about events happening that you can go to, be selective, but all of that. And also the more you're out there, the more you connect and find people that you like and enjoy being with. And then onwards, it just grows and grows and grows like a ripple effect. But it starts with that shared sense of purpose and passion.
Thank you.
Oh, great question, Reena. Thank you so much for contributing. And it's nice to hear such incredible advice, advice that I'm also going to take on for myself. We've had some nice comments. Just to note, I have put a comment in the chat, but if anyone's not seen it, there will be a poll. If you can take part in that, it just helps us with future events or anything that you're looking for, what you think of this webinar itself. There are a few comments as well. So Simon said, agree, Billie, events like this are so important for men to educate themselves and hear different experiences to have better conversations. And also Kirsty has popped in her LinkedIn to say happy to network with anyone on this call. So we will definitely connect. Ritika, thank you for adding your LinkedIn as well. Billie, if you could pop your details as well, anyone that wants to get in touch can. If there's any questions that come to mind after the webinar or just anything you'd like to speak about more personally. But is there anything, anything else anyone wanted to contribute of the guests? Reena, is your hand up again?
It is up again.
Oh, I'm happy with that.
If there's no other questions, because I'm just keen to make the most of this opportunity, really. So I'll just wait to check that there's no other questions. Otherwise, I do have a question.
Yeah, perfect. Go ahead.
So I guess one of the privileges of being in positions that I'm currently in is that you're involved in recruitment and I'm trying in that space around inclusive recruitment. And so I think recruiting diverse talent is less of a challenge for us, but it's nurturing that diverse talent that I'm really interested in. So when they're with us, that they have a positive experience with us. And so I'm really interested in positive action and what we can do in this space around supporting our colleagues, be it women, be it, you know, colleagues from marginalized backgrounds, whatever it is, knowing that it's not a level playing field, what more should we be doing to level that playing field as part of that onboarding and induction into the workplace?
So I think something that we did that we found was really beneficial is for anyone that was sort of joining into various teams or various different parts of the business, you could do something like a survey to ask about some of these things, and you can make them anonymous. So we made it anonymous and asked about, you know, what areas of development do you feel you need support in? Are there any challenges that you feel that you're not comfortable to bring up? That sort of anonymous thing, it's a very simple tool, but it gave us a really good insight into what sort of elements people felt like they were missing. And from that, then we used that to create sort of a development hub opportunity where we have various different webinars focused on those things. And they were very simple things such as, you know, interview skills, competencies, you know, how best to network, where to network, you know, CV writing skills, or people just asking for coaching in general that maybe don't feel comfortable approaching people directly. So I think if you maybe were to look at something like that, you'd probably get some really beneficial feedback. And from there, you can look to develop things like mentor programs, you know, coaching sessions. I'm in the process of developing something at the minute, which is essentially like speed dating with MDs, where, you know, you'll get 5 minutes with each MD to be able to sort of ask them questions face to face. And it's kind of an opt-in thing rather than a forced thing, because again, not everybody is comfortable in those situations. But I think, again, it comes back to that giving people opportunities to join those things. They may fall completely flat on the face, but you'll probably find that even if just a few people attend those sorts of sessions based off the feedback they gave, it will be really beneficial for them. And it may be that someone only just wants you to share your network with them because they're trying to network and they're not sure where to start. So I find that was a really useful tool that we used.
Thank you. I think that's a great idea, actually, to start with what's the need, trying to scope what the need is. Thank you.
Yeah, I think it's important as well, during the onboarding, just to signpost anything that you already have happening, you know, and also to make sure that it's, you know, you highlight that it is a psychologically safe space as well, that if there's any discussions that people need to have that they wouldn't usually feel comfortable having, you know, you have these safe spaces available. And I think that's inherently what these groups become as well. I know from personal experience about the Women's Inclusive Network that did become a real haven for women to develop and to feel confident enough to approach situations that potentially they wouldn't have approached before. And I think a lot of it as well starts, you know, you can create a buddy system, you can create all of those internal mentors, the employee resource groups or staff networks. And it's just actively supporting women, I think, and showing that presence. And I think leadership have a real key role in that, in being vocal and in being in front of it to make sure that, you know, they're highlighting this is important to us, you belong here, we will develop you wherever it is that you want to develop, and we will make this an equitable playing field.
I'm a strong advocate of a personal advisory board. So that's really stood me in good stead, especially in the last 2-3 years as I'm out and about a lot more. People that I have formed relationships with that work in similar or very different sectors, so they can bring unique perspective, people I can trust, I can sound off. Those I know will give me sane advice. So having your own personal advisory board of a trusted circle that has to be varied has really helped. Because you big each other up on those opportunities, you open doors for each other, you support each other in more ways than just strategic advice. So
definitely. And I think as well, in terms of just highlighting, you know, that you do have flexible work policies, you know, you understand the work-life balance, because, you know, the roles do tip in towards women when it comes to, you know, caring responsibilities in terms of children or, you know, parents. So I think it's important just highlighting all of the things, understanding the context of being a woman in the workplace and what impact tightness can have on that.
Can I just ask about the personal advisory board? So is this a group that come together, or is it that you've got these different people that you speak to?
Different people. I call them my personal advisory board, right?
Right,
So
okay.
I mean, not most of them don't even know each other, but they all serve very different purposes in my career, personal and professional journey.
Yeah.
So and we bring very different perspectives. I've got the 6 names in front of me, and I know sort of when I've come across something or I need something, or you know, and again they'll open up doors for me. So almost sponsors as well as advisors, as well as like it's just, yeah.
That's what I need. I need to build my own board.
I think I need that in my day-to-day life as well.
Yeah,
It's a great idea. I love it.
Amazing. But we had some lovely comments, just to say, great to hear real experiences and how others have overcome barriers. Thanks for attending and for being my sounding board for all of this information. It's been really interesting, really inspiring personally, and I hope others have taken some points on and are able to take those away into their own workplaces and, you know, help break down those barriers.